Anxiety seems to be a complicated subject in the mental health world. There are as many opinions as there are drugs on the subject, and as an ex-sufferer of anxiety, this is very frustrating to watch. When something is complicated, progress becomes very slow, and we miss important insights that could be staring us right in the face. So the solution then is to simplify. The reason I can call myself an ex-sufferer of anxiety today is because I was shown exactly how to simplify the anxiety condition, and I'd like to share this information with you.
How does or why does a person get into what we call an anxiety state? Just to be clear, there is a difference between anxiety and the anxiety state itself. Anyone can experience anxiety. Studying for an exam, sitting in an exam, applying for a job, being interviewed can bring on anxiety, but the person experiencing this anxiety knows why they are in the state that they're in. That is just normal anxiety. But the anxiety state itself is different, because the person who is in an anxiety state is concerned, worried, or frightened of the symptoms they are experiencing. They have no understanding of why they're like this, so they fear these symptoms. Fear must come into the picture for someone to be in an anxiety state. They become bewildered about the state that they're in because they've got no answers to their questions, such as, why am I like this? Am I going to be all right? Am I going to faint, collapse, die, have a heart attack, lose control, or go crazy? They look at others and think, why can't I be like them? Why can't I be the person I used to be? Why can't I be my old self once more? There's a big difference between anxiety and the anxiety state itself.
Back in 2010, after a series of stressful life events, I myself went into an anxiety state. I woke up one morning and a heavy feeling of doom filled my body. I tried to get rid of the feeling by getting some fresh air and going for a walk, but the feeling just didn't leave. When I woke up the following morning and the feeling was still there, I became even more anxious, and this was the beginning of the most hellish experience of my life.
What causes someone to end up in an anxiety state? Well, there are many reasons. It could be ongoing stress at their place of work. It could be business or financial difficulties, or an impending divorce, or just simply stress in a relationship. Usually it starts off with stress for whatever reason, and that stress builds and builds and compounds until they start to notice that things are happening inside them that don't feel right. Their heart might start to race, they might get the shakes, they might find it difficult to breathe, chest pains, heart palpitations, missed heartbeats, blurred vision, a lump in their throat making swallowing difficult. They have become afraid of the state they are in. In actual fact, they are now more concerned about the state they're in than what might have caused it. That is their secondary worry or secondary fear. Their main fear is of the state that they're in and looking for a way out of where they are. And it's in moments such as these that the person who's suffering must be explained to. They must be given an explanation of why they are like this. Symptom by symptom must be explained to them, so that will take away the bewilderment. It stops them asking these questions. Why am I like this? because all they're doing now is trying to think of a way of getting themselves out of the state they've ended up in. But the more they struggle to find a way out, the more they become caught up in the anxiety state itself. It's like a fly trying to free itself from a spider's web. The more it struggles, the more it becomes entrapped.
Okay, let's simplify the anxiety condition so we can see it for what it truly is. Going into an anxiety state is the result of someone who has taken on continual stress for whatever reason over an extended period of time. This stress has built up in their nervous system, and a final stressful event will cause their nervous system to overload and become sensitized. Just like a muscle which gets overused, with too much stress, your nervous system will eventually become too exhausted to function normally. Once your nervous system is in this exhausted state, anxiety will completely take over and your mind will go into a fight or flight mode. Adrenaline will be pumped through your body, which will create over-exaggerated physical symptoms and over-exaggerated anxious thoughts. These two dysfunctional symptoms of a fatigued nervous system are the basic crux of the anxiety state. A person in this state won't be able to think rationally because everything that is happening inside them is in a state of fear and heightened feeling due to the excess adrenaline being pumped around their body. This is why someone in an anxiety state will feel like they are going crazy or about to die. If this person in an anxiety state knew what was going on, they would simply be able to accept it as a stressed nervous system and allow it to pass. The same way we accept flu symptoms when we come down with a cold. We know with some rest our body will heal itself. The same goes for your nervous system, but you have to learn how to be an observer of your symptoms rather than being involved in them. You have to accept that your exhausted nervous system is going to cause your body and mind to not function in a normal manner for a while until it repairs itself. Once you are able to not add any unnecessary stress on top of your already stressed nervous system, your body will heal itself naturally.
They must be explained to. That's the first thing that must be done. Then they must be put on a program that is going to show them the way to full recovery. And once they have recovered, they must be shown how to stay recovered so that they never, ever, ever, ever go back into that state again.
Unfortunately for me at the time, I didn't have this information. I went to a doctor who didn't have this information, who told me I would have to deal with intense anxiety for the rest of my life and prescribed me some drugs, all of which made me feel even more anxious. But the doctor's words didn't sit right with me. The fact that the doctor didn't know much about the condition made me feel as though there must be something he was missing. So I went searching the internet looking for another perspective. I found a lot of different treatments and ideas, but none of them felt right to me. I quickly started to feel hopeless until persistence finally paid off and I stumbled onto a website that described exactly what I was mentally and physically going through. I rang up the number and I was called back promptly by a friendly and excited man named David Johnson. David spent 2 hours on the phone with me explaining exactly what was going on, the how, why, where, and what of the entire anxiety condition, or nervous fatigue as he put it. I found out that David had been a past sufferer himself. He knew that the method of recovery he learned was not very well known, but very important, so he decided to start his own counseling service to help others heal their own anxiety. He told me that the method of recovery he used on himself and with his clients was created by Dr. Claire Weekes, an Australian GP and scientist who also suffered from anxiety and was able to heal herself using her knowledge of the human nervous system and a bit of common sense.
Every day, Thousands of men and women all over the world have their lives ruined by the miseries of nervous illness. It can manifest itself as edginess or fatigue, that not quite coping with life feeling. Or, at its most extreme, it can cripple the sufferer, often ruining his life and that of his family, as loved ones try to cope with the mass of confusing symptoms which can accompany the anxiety state. Well, many families suffered in this way for years until they found help in the teachings of a doctor who has become internationally acclaimed for her understanding and treatment of nervous illness, Dr. Claire Weekes. Through her books and tapes, she's helped literally thousands of patients worldwide. With her deep insight into the cause of their nervous illness and her compassionate understanding of the simple road to recovery, she teaches patients that they've often become trapped in a cycle of nervous suffering by worrying more about the state they're in, the symptoms themselves, than the original cause of their illness. Over the last few years, I've interviewed Dr. Weekes on a number of occasions about her life's work in treating nervous illness. This compilation of those talks represents a unique record of Dr. Weekes' approach to treating the anxiety state, depression, obsessions, and phobias. But first, we meet Anne, our patient. Her pattern of illness began simply, but progressed unchecked into the horrors of an obsessional anxiety state.
You can't get rid of an obsession by going in and stopping out. Sometimes with phobias, you can stay in. If you've got agoraphobia, you can stay in and you can get a measure of relief when you're not fighting with it all the time. But with obsessions, you can't, because they're in your head and you carry them around wherever you go, sleeping and waking. They're there. And they're not just as large as life, they're 10 times larger and much more frightening. It's a bit like being in a room with a horror movie. And there's a great big screen and it's in full stereophonic sound and glorious technical, and there's someone saying, watch and listen, and it going on, and you're terrified. And you can't get out of the room and you can't turn it off, and it goes on and on and on and on till you believe it can't go on any longer, and it still does. And you get in such a terrible state, and then you get in a state of shock and you can't keep a limb still, and you're sick all the time, sick at the drop of the hat, and you lose an awful lot of weight.
Anne is just one of many thousands helped from nervous breakdown to full health by the teachings of Dr. Claire Weekes. I asked Dr. Weekes how her work first developed in her early years.
Well, first of all, I was a physician, that's an ordinary doctor. And I learnt fairly soon that to help people, and I like people, that's another thing, you have to give them as much peace of mind as you can. That if you can send a patient away with peace of mind, half the battle is won. So that gradually got me the reputation of being a sort of person who was interested in nervous reaction of patients.
So have all your books and teaching come through your own experiences as a doctor, or have you done any specialist training the way other psychiatrists would have done?
Well, I did the normal psychiatric training, we all do as we go through, but I then knew I had myself been nervously exhausted, and you learn a lot, and especially when I just got myself out of it. So that I found out what it was like to be nervously exhausted and how to recover from it. And you see, I started medicine when I was 37. Before that, I did science. I was over at University College here doing science, and I was able to bring to medicine, I think, perhaps a more mature attitude than if I had started at 19. I had grown to know people more than if I'd started medicine at 19, and I liked people, and I think that all combined to help me want to help other people very much, not just as a sort of general practitioner looking after their coughs and colds, but as a person looking after the whole person.
So what was the difference between the advice that you were giving to people and the advice that perhaps psychiatrists were giving? Well, did you have a very different technique? Is your method very different?
It is different. In fact, when my book first came out, it was called by one of the psychiatrists in Sydney as homespun philosophy. And I suppose it's just common sense. I had to see it work. As a GP, you not only see the patient when they come to you with a nervous problem, but you also see them when they come with coughs and colds and headaches. So you follow through, and I had to see it work. I think that the years I spent doing research work as a scientist helped me very much to analyse what was happening to a patient and to see the simplicity that lay behind the whole pattern of their nervous suffering. I think that being a scientist first, you do look for the trunk of the tree. You're not led away by the leaves entirely. And I was able to pick I thought the most important part of their illness and their reactions.
I'd had desensitisation, that helped, and relaxation, that helped. I even tried hypnosis, but that didn't work because I don't hypnotise. Some people do, some people don't. I mean, everything there is going, I've had, and it didn't work. So once I started talking about leucotomy, I thought, that's it. Because, I mean, as a teenager, I knew someone that had had a leucotomy, and I'd thought from then onwards I'd die first because it hadn't been successful. And when they started talking about it with me, I thought, well, that's it. I've had enough. I'm going.
There we are, an example of the despair that Anne went through. But how were you able to help her?
Marion, the others who had tried, and they tried so hard, had picked on complications. They had told her she was an aggressive type. They had gone for difficult explanations. I went for the simple one. I explained to her that this obsession that was upsetting her so much was no more than a strange thought in a tired mind. Now, she could grasp that, and that was the truth, because that's all it was. She grasped it, and I taught her to glimpse it. If she could only grasp it for a few moments each day, she was seeing the truth, just for a few moments, and that's what she practiced.
But is this what makes your work unique? The fact that you go through, that you cut away all the bits that are confusing and you go through for try and find the simple remedy?
I think that's it, Marion. I do. I try to give the patient an understanding of the simplicity and then a program with which he can follow the simple route back to normal feeling, normal intensity of feeling.
Is that what you're going to do for us over the next few weeks?
Yes, and I'm going to do it for not only the people who are nervously ill, not only open their eyes to the simplicity and the simple plan for recovering, but for other people who've never been nervously ill, so that they will lose the feeling of mystery in nervous illness, and that they will be no longer afraid to talk about it, read about it, or even to listen to me talk. There must be no mystery about nervous illness, because there is none really. I mean anxiety state, of course. It is a simple pattern of development, an almost inevitable pattern of development, and of course recovery just lies in the reversing the pattern.
My own personal suffering was the end result of around about 7 years of stress at my place of work. And it just built and built and built until the point where I just couldn't carry on. And I saw my doctor, who immediately referred me on to a local day centre or a day clinic. And I saw an occupational therapist. Her name was Pauline. Pauline listened to what I had to say, made a few notes, and then said to me, go to the local bookshop and buy a book called Help for Your Nerves by Dr. Claire Weeks. And I went to that bookshop and I took the book up to the counter, and the woman who served me said, "We sell more of these books than any other books in the health section." And she said, "I have one of these books and I call it my Bible." My question, of course, was, "Why do you call it your Bible?" Her answer was, "Because 18 months ago I was a nervous wreck and this doctor showed me the way out of the state I'd got into." So I took the book home and I had some lunch and I sat down about 1:30 and I started reading. And what I read was me on every page I read, me just about in every word she had written. And after about 3 hours, I had read the book right through in one sitting. I remember looking across the lounge at the wall opposite thinking, I cannot believe what I've just read. This doctor has described me to a T. Not only that, she is showing me the way out of the state I've got into. Medication, yes, I was prescribed diazepam, 2 milligram, 3 times a day. But I decided no, I was not going to do it that way. I was going to do it the Claire Weeks way. So I would go out practicing at night, walking the streets of my hometown, panicking, practicing my way through these moments of panic, learning from my practice, and perhaps every 2 weeks I would take one only 2 milligram of diazepam. My body wasn't used to it, so it would calm me down for 24 hours. I would have a break, a rest. On a very odd occasion, maybe I'd get 2 days of rest from my suffering, but I always knew I hadn't recovered, and I always knew that there was more practice to be done. And that is exactly what happened. I took, in my 2¼ years of suffering, I think it was 79 tablets over that time, and that was it. The last one I didn't take. I used to carry it around knowing that I didn't need it, and I used to look at it and I used to think, I don't need you. But anyway, and that's what I did. I did have I think it was 12 months where I had no symptoms, thinking that I had recovered, but in actual fact I hadn't. And it was a good lesson to learn from. I panicked on one of Auckland's motorways and ended up in an ambulance. And I had to go back into her teachings to find out what I had not done, because I knew there was something I hadn't done right, and I did find it. And so I had another 9 months of practice. This time I fully recovered. The previous time I had recovered to a point of wellness, which wasn't full recovery. So in this program, in part 3, I make sure that my clients do not do what I did, that their journey will be the correct journey right from the start, from the get-go.
Fatigue can often be one of the most distressing aspects of nervous illness. Tired minds can give rise to all manner of exaggerated or inappropriate thoughts. This was the problem which faced our patient Anne.
Nervous illness first started, well, not illness, but problems first started when I was 20. We'd had a burglar. I heard someone coming up the stairs in the middle of the night, and it was such a shock. It scared the daylights out of me. It would scare the daylights out of anyone, I think. And the fact that we never saw who it was, I heard someone coming in and running back down again, and I never saw him. And after that, I couldn't sleep because I was absolutely petrified. And it just broke my sleep pattern. And once your sleep pattern is broken, you just don't function as well. And at the time, I had an awful lot of stress because this was just before I got married, and I had all the arrangements to make for the wedding. I had all my trousseau to make because I'm not stock size, so I had everything to make. My dad was ill, he was in hospital, we had to go visit him, you know, and look after him. And we didn't know if the wedding was going to be on or off. And in general, it was just a right lot of hassle at that time. And things just got worse and worse and worse. The more tired I got, the more frightened I got. And the next, you know, the less you can sleep, the more tired you are. So the next morning I was more tired, and the next day I felt worse. And I started getting worried about niggling little things. Make sure you turn the gas off properly. Go back and make sure. So I go back and back and back, and I didn't know if the damn thing was on or off in the end, you know. And I could spend hours. I just couldn't get out of the house because I couldn't stop checking the gas cooker and checking all the switches, etc.
Dr. Weeks, what do people mean by nervous fatigue?
They mean 4 things: muscular, emotional, mental fatigue, and a kind of fatigue of the spirit. But nervous fatigue develops so slowly, so insidiously, that the average nervously ill person doesn't recognise it. And the complicated symptoms that he can get, he thinks, are some strange thing doing this to him. He doesn't realise that this is only fatigue. For example, the fact that nervous emotions become so grossly exaggerated, he thinks that he is going crazy. He doesn't realise that fatigue nerves begin to get so aroused that they register emotions so acutely. Stronger, stronger, stronger. For instance, even joy can be felt almost hysterically. A sad sight can seem tragic. Noise can be heard. A noisy movie can be heard so noisily that the person will want to leave the theatre, will have to go outside. That is very, very confusing.
So, are people mentally ill when they reach that stage where they're overreacting to everything?
I don't think so, no. They're emotionally overreacting. It's an emotional tie-up. For instance, a woman watching her mother packing to go away for the weekend to her own little lonely flat. She was so emotionally tired, the woman had a nervous breakdown at the time, that the thought of her mother going to that lonely flat was so upsetting that she thought, how can I go on living feeling like this, But that was emotional. Her mental thought was all right. It was simply, my mother is going to this lonely flat, how can I go on with this? She didn't realise that it was her that was reacting the wrong way, not the situation. And this is what one has to teach these people. It is your oversensitised reaction, not the situation. Learn to see that and learn to accept the oversensitised reaction until gradually you can let your reactions calm. But you know, while reactions are oversensitised and are reacting so strongly, they exhaust our supply of stress hormones and we become exhausted. And that is a type of adrenal depletion, just as when you get a person with organic adrenal depletion that is not treated, and we call it Addison's disease, those people are so tired they can hardly lift a hand. I think that is what Jane Austen had. But the nervous exhaustion that comes to a nervously ill person is as tiring as that. They have exhausted their stress hormones.
So when they're in that exhausted state, what are the first things that you do to help them?
Explain what's happening to them and that it is recoverable. Instead of lying on the bed thinking, I'll never get out of this, look, I can hardly lift my hand. They have to get up off that bed, float off that bed and start moving, even though they're exhausted. They're not going to hurt themselves. It is amazing how quickly nervous exhaustion will heal if the person accepts it, accepts his jelly legs, accepts his weakness and works with it there. Sitting down sometimes during the day, yes, of course, and not doing unnecessary things, yes, of course. But from going out and having to lean on an arm for support, within 2 weeks he can be walking normally if it's done with understanding and utter acceptance.
Because I imagine some people might turn to stimulants at this time in their life. They think, oh, I must take some of these caffeine tablets or something just to keep me going. I suppose really they shouldn't touch them at all, should they?
Well, caffeine tablets are not only not caffeine tablets are going to make their heart race too, and that's going to be a very upsetting thing. Stimulants, no. I never prescribed stimulants. In fact, very rarely did I prescribe tranquilizers, but as I explained in my last talk, they have their place. But mental fatigue does come into it too. And this is when a person has thought about his illness for so long, gone over and over and over it, that he, like a student who's been studying for too long, begins to feel that he can't concentrate, he can't remember, and thoughts stick. A very tired mind loses its flexibility, and that's when a person so easily develops a phobia or an obsession. It's as simple as that. It's simply nervous fatigue working in a mind, a tired mind with exhausting emotional reactions.
Can nervous fatigue develop from physical fatigue? You mentioned the young student there overworking. I can remember people having breakdowns when I was at college because they seemed to be constantly working very hard over their books. That seemed to be a nervous illness developing from physical stress?
I think you could work as hard as you liked over your books, providing you didn't become anxious because you were doing it. You have to add the extra stress of anxiety and fear of the exams, and finding that you were so tired you weren't able to take it in any longer. And my golly, you've only got a fortnight or 2 days, whatever it is, before the exams. Then the panic starts, and then the extra exhaustion of panic, the extra fear. I think that was the straw that broke the poor old student's back, not the amount of work done. You can work and work, you can become emotionally exhausted, you can become mentally exhausted if you don't panic because you are. If you understand what is happening to you and you say, well, I'm mentally exhausted, my thoughts come hauntingly, they come slowly. I will take time and my body will heal that just as it will heal a broken leg. That is the cure. Reverse the pattern, as I say all the time. Reverse the pattern with acceptance, knowing what's happening, and letting one's body heal itself, just as it would heal a cut.
It's that acceptance again, isn't it, that you've been talking about in the last few talks that you've given. It's that relaxing into the situation.
It's the attitude of acceptance based on understanding. One can even accept without understanding and be cured. Many people who are cured through faith have done it through acceptance on faith, not on understanding. Utter acceptance can be there just on faith. But when it's based on understanding, it has a stronger foundation, a much stronger foundation.
Dr. Hazel Claire Weeks, born in 1903 and passed away on the 2nd of June 1990, was an incredible human being. She was my mentor. That doctor showed me the way to complete recovery, to full recovery. And as we are recording here today, I have been recovered over 31 and a half years, and I have been doing this work, helping others through her teachings for the last 30 plus years. Shortly before she passed on, she made it known to her family, to her nieces, that one of her last wishes was that her life's work be made available to as many sufferers around the world as possible. And in gratitude for what she did for me, I am keeping her legacy alive through these recordings. What I have recorded, in essence, is the complete teachings of this incredible doctor. Quite often people will say she was a woman before her time. I don't believe that. I actually think it was her time. And as I say, it's a delight to be able to do what I do. I would never ever put myself ahead of this doctor. This is her life's work. This is her legacy. My legacy will be simply having kept her legacy alive in my own small way. And I'm sure she'd be pleased with what I've done for her.
Hi, my name's Sam and I'm very excited to make this video. I guess this video is really just to give a bit of a testimonial and a recommendation for the Freedom from Fear Recovery program that I use personally myself to recover from anxiety and panic. I had anxiety probably for many, many years and never really realized it. I always had that kind of nervous tension that you feel, a bit of adrenaline every time I'd go to work. Had no idea what it was. For me, it was normal. I guess it finally accumulated in burnout. So I was at work one day and got these nasty surges of panic. I'd probably been burning the candle at both ends, didn't really know it at the time, hadn't fully been taking care of myself, and there'd been a lot of stress I'd endured throughout my life that I hadn't really sort of noted or clocked. And so I ended up suffering from these really bad panic attacks, intrusive thinking, obsessive thinking, really unpleasant and nasty stuff. And I thought, gee, this is not good. There's something really wrong with me. There's something fundamental wrong. And so it kind of forced me to stop, take a look. But I guess the problem was, there was not really anywhere to turn. If you go to the emergency department, many of the professionals, whilst well-intended, don't really understand anxiety or panic and don't understand what's going on, and they're not really equipped to deal with it. I remember actually going home. I was in London at the time when I experienced my first panic attack. And I remember being at home in Melbourne, staying at my parents' house just for a visit. And I was still bewildered. David, the founder of the program, talks about this a lot in his program. But I remember being bewildered by the state I was in. But there was something in me that knew perhaps it was happening for a reason and it was an opportunity. I remember being in the shower at my parents' house, kind of looking up at the tiles and going, why am I thinking like this? Why can't I get my thinking straight? I sort of knew it was my thinking, but I knew something I could shift it, but I had no idea how. So I started Googling furiously to find answers. And I remember coming across David's website. And I just remember him saying something like, this is not in the least bit serious. He talks about how suffering is a living hell, anxiety is a living hell, but that it's actually not in the least bit serious, I think are the words he used. And that gave me a lot of comfort. He also talked about intrusive thinking, and which I had a lot as one of my symptoms. He talked about all the physical symptoms of stress and how they fuel the negative thinking. And that was something really powerful for me. He made something that's so awful, so simple. And that's what really helped me. There was no magic wand, but the magic wand was just really understanding the state you're in. And he provides a really simple tool and method, plus a lot of information that's necessary to really just understand what's going on with you and how to cope with yourself when you're worrying or suffering from thoughts. So I just can't recommend it enough. The program was life-changing for me, and I literally did achieve freedom as a result of doing it. So if you are looking at the program or considering it, I wholeheartedly recommend it.
Yes, hi, my name's Carl and I live in Canada, and I thought I'd share my story of recovery from anxiety using David Johnson's program. I suffered from social anxiety and generalized anxiety for well over 30 years, and it was basically 24/7, every hour of the day, every day of the week. And it took quite a toll on my life. Pretty much every decision I made, the first thing I would do is think, how's this going to affect my anxiety, or how is my anxiety going to affect this decision and what I choose to do. And over the years, I tried pretty much everything I can think of to cure myself. I had counseling, I took various medications over the years, I had CBT, exposure therapy, I even signed up for a hypnosis course, and then things changed. It was just around Christmas or New Year, I think about 5 years ago, and again I'd got pretty despairing about my situation and my suffering, and I went on Google again, And I stumbled on David Johnson's video, and when I listened to it, what he said made sense to me. I mean, he obviously understood the condition, he understood what I was going through, and what he said made a lot of sense. So I immediately purchased his program and started practicing. I didn't see changes immediately. In fact, I mean, the very first change was I got a little bit of an increase in anxiety, I think, because for the first time I was really kind of facing my condition and actually looking at it rather than trying to suppress it or or bury it or ignore it. Yeah, so long before I'd fully recovered, my life had improved so much in terms of quality, and my just the quality of my life was that good by that time that I actually didn't care if I recovered or not anymore. I mean, I was perfectly happy with with how far I'd come. But I carried on with the program anyway. I kept practicing, and things got better and better, and it took me a couple of years, but I recovered fully, and I just knew at some point that that there was no way I was going to get dragged back into the anxiety state anymore, and I'd learned what I needed to learn. I learned how to deal with anxiety if it came up, which it always does in life anyway. We always have stress, and we always have anxiety no matter what. The thing is that when we learn to respond to it the right way, it's no longer we no longer suffer, and it doesn't spiral into the anxiety state again. And that was a wonderful feeling. That was kind of incredible. I never thought I was going to get to that stage or to that to that place in life. Well, I mean, it was actually better than anything I'd imagined recovery was going to be. So I was to say I was thrilled, put it that way, is an understatement, and still am. I am still eternally grateful for the work that David did in putting the program together, and that Claire Weeks before him, Dr. Claire Weeks, the work that she put in, in developing the approach to anxiety, an approach of acceptance where you don't need to struggle or fight to change anything, or try and convince yourself that things aren't the way they are. That it can all be accomplished simply through accepting how you are and how you feel. I mean, that was, when I started, that was a mind-blowing concept to me, that, how can acceptance possibly do this? Because if I accept my anxiety, then doesn't that mean it's going to stay around? I mean, I'm never going to get rid of it if I accept it. It's not going to go away. I've been trying to get rid of it my whole life, and now, along comes this crazy idea that all I had to do was accept it.